Hi, this is Tay with Thinking with Tay. Today we have attorney and real estate broker MJ Clay with us today. Hi, MJ. How are you?
Hello, how are you today? Great to join
I,
you.
oh my goodness, thanks for being here today. You know, you and I, as when I went out to, I wanted to reach out to you simply because one, you being an attorney as well as a real estate agent, broker. I wanted to make sure that because this comes to me a lot. Some people, especially with real estate transactions, because I'm an attorney myself, they'll say, can you help me with my real estate transaction? I'm looking at purchasing a home. Can you look at my real estate agreement? I'm like, you know what? How about I get somebody on here who does both? How about I get somebody on here who does both? And so you popped into my mind, first one to pop into my mind because you serve in both capacities and you've been doing it for a number of years. So I'm so happy to have you with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I can talk real estate anytime. It didn't take any convincing, to call me up and talk law or real estate. So I appreciate the invitation. I'm honored to be here and I look forward to sharing some great nuggets.
Oh, I know you will. Thank you so much. So we're going to go ahead and get started, Mika. So just for the listening audience, we will be discussing today the nexus between law and real estate. Again, no better person to talk about that today than attorney MJ Clay and realtor. So, Mika, tell me, what inspired you to become an attorney first? I want to just touch on that first.
This is kind of a story my mom likes to tell. I've wanted to be an attorney since I was about 4 years old. I could not even say the word attorney. I don't know if I saw an episode of Perry Mason or Matlock or whatever it was, yes. But it was the impression of being able to convince people of things, yes. And to present a case and to fight for justice. So yes. My mom said, since I was 4, I would say, I want to be a lawyer. And I could barely get the words out, but ironically, my life has been in pursuit of that. Yes. I, enjoyed watching, a lot of the lawyers on TV. Of course, most, Black attorneys my age were inspired by Claire Huxtable. She was a great prototype. She gave the blueprint. And so even now I find myself watching old episodes of The Cosby Show thinking, gosh, I did not realize how impactful that was. But once I was, in high school, I had awesome opportunity to be mentored by some attorneys. Yes. Attended undergrad and got to continue that process and got to law school and absolutely, truly realized that's where I was intended to be. So I've always known that's what I wanted to do. I really could not envision myself doing anything else except being a realtor. Yes. And I'll get to that in a minute.
Yes. Awesome. And it's so funny. You're right. And we're in similar age groups. I think I got you by a couple years, but anyway, I too was inspired. Actually, it was Matlock for me. And then it was Claire Huxtable. I mean, just to have the representation on the TV was an awesome thing because it let us all know that we could do that as well. And we could serve in that capacity effectively. So great. I love that story. Very similar in nature. So how many years have you been in the practice of law?
I've been practicing law since 2004. So we're going on 20 years at this point. I started out doing criminal law. Yes. And well, let me backtrack. I started out as a paralegal because as I was studying for the bar, I needed to work. Yeah. Law school's over.
Honey, we all do.
But I did not realize it was a divine placement. It was a divine placement because in undergrad, my major was business management with a focus on human resources. Okay. I always kind of had a feel for employment rights and for representing people in that form. I really didn't know what it looked like, but I always had a feel for it. And so when I came out of law school and I was looking for something to kind of get my foot in the door, I ended up working for a federal agency as a paralegal. It was a great entry-level opportunity for me to understand federal employment law and how that looks and what the practice is like. at that time, I studied for the bar and passed the bar. And understanding that I didn't have a lot of experience, I decided, if I'm going to move up in this field, I'm going to have to get some litigation experience because they're litigators.
Oh,
and so I left that position and went to be a public defender in Gaston County.
Yes.
Which was an amazing experience. Kellen Morris was my supervisor at the time, and he really believed that attorneys should jump in feet first and just learn by fire. And I did.
Yeah, baptism by fire, as they say. Yeah.
So after that, I proceeded back to the that federal agency and was able to work as an attorney representative because now I had the litigation experience.
I had the experience
to really, move forward. And so was there a couple years, and now I sit in a different federal agency where I actually make decisions on employment discrimination cases. So
very fascinating. So moving on into the real estate area. So then after doing that, practicing, obviously you still do that. So what inspired you to be, go into real estate and to become a realtor?
Again, back to it being a child.
Okay.
My mom is a realtor. She was a realtor for many years.
Oh,
even before she became a realtor, my mom she's a big dreamer. And so I tell the story, and my dad probably will roll his eyes. My mom decided they were going to move 10 years before it actually happened. And she was out looking at houses, and, really, she's the person who inspires me to dream beyond what you see right now. Because at the moment, my dad is a very practical person. He was like, we don't need another house. Our house is fine. We're not going, our budget's not going that high. My mom said, watch this. Took 10 years, a lot of prayer and diligence. But I was a little kid in the back of her Toyota Corolla riding around, my brother and I, looking at houses. What we didn't realize was that was dream mapping.
Yes.
And so I think in high school, my mom actually became a realtor. She retired from her full-time employment. And, I got to see her in practice. We're very different in practice. My mom did not realize real estate is a business. So she's a very compassionate person, and she really used her practice to help and elevate people in a certain way. And I still aim to do that. So, like I said, my mom was a realtor. My dad was an investor. So I was also the little kid in the front seat of the car counting rent money.
Oh my goodness.
So I was immersed in it.
Yes, you were.
From the beginning. My dad, I have to say this, he grew up very, very modestly. And he's the middle of his family. He decided we're going to own a home. My grandparents had never owned a home until my dad graduated from college. Wow. And he tells a story about, they were contracting to build this home back in the 70s, and they couldn't get any traction. They couldn't get the banks to give them. And he was a full, a good job and salary.
Yes.
But he couldn't get the banks to respond. He couldn't get any traction. My grandmother was working for a woman who was a professor at North Carolina State at the time. And he said she made one phone call and everything changed. So, wow. That's where I get it from.
But, I love that, because we talk about how, we need to expose our children early on. Sometimes I've heard parents say, well, they don't need to know that. They don't need to know that we may be even struggling with our bills. They may not, keep that between us. Well, what some things teaches, our children, when we expose them to certain things, it teaches them how to manage, be it money, responsibility, and knowing that even with relationships between parents, it's not perfect. And you teach them problem solving skills as well. So I'm a firm believer in we have to start to educate our kids early. So that's a blessing that you had a realtor and an investor as parents. And look at you now, an attorney and a realtor yourself. I mean, amazing. I mean, they laid the foundation for you, the blueprint. You were exposed very early on. I mean, they laid the path for you. You walked right through it. Now, some kids don't, but you were smart about it. And that's absolutely phenomenal. Great. So now, how many years have you been a realtor?
I have been a realtor since 2007. I started out in 2000 and the same year I became an attorney, I also became a mortgage broker. So I started out in the real estate business because honestly, I did not think I wanted to be a realtor. I knew I wanted to be in real estate. But seeing my mom drive all around town and work with clients for months and months and months, and then they may or may not buy a house, was like, I don't know if I want to do that. Thinking mortgage brokers, people are coming to me, they need money, the deal is already in play. But it was the height of subprime. And you and I know the legal bells and whistles were going off in a different way. And so I was a mortgage broker for a couple of years and was actually the mortgage broker for the firm that I ended up becoming a realtor in. So I've been with the firm the whole time, but realized that it was too slippery of a slope and people were too loose and fast with important information and important details that I could no longer engage in that business and feel at ease. It was the height of no doc loans, stated income,
all of it.
You know, and there were a lot of people who were making moves. I understand that there was an open access, and so people walked through the door, but some people didn't realize they were walking into their doom.
Absolutely.
And I did not like that side of the transaction, but I realized that was divine as well, because now I know the language, I know the process. I can assist if something goes wrong. I know enough to ask questions. Well, what about this? What does the guideline say? Where one thing that I think that realtors or clients looking to hire realtors need to know, we need to know a lot about a lot of things. We need to know about financing. We need to know about construction. We need to know about, the permitting. Like, there's a lot of details that are in a real estate transaction that when I look back over my life, the things that I've been able to learn from, the mentors I've been able to work with, have prepared me and have given me some tools that I can use today. So,
absolutely. It's interesting that you say that, and goodness, 2007, that's been a long time. So your legal career and your real estate career have overlapped for a number of years. So you've been at this dual sort of profession, consistently throughout. And wow, I mean, that's amazing. So tell me, what's the difference between a real estate agent? Now, I know this, but for our listeners, just so that they fully understand, what's the difference between a real estate agent and a real estate broker?
Really, it really varies by state, but in our state, North and South Carolina, it's the level of supervision required. In North Carolina, you start out as we all start out as provisional brokers. We've gotten rid of the salesman, but it's really a salesman position. When you're starting out, you require a certain number of transactions and supervision by a broker in charge. After you have completed additional training, because in North Carolina, and it's very similar to South Carolina, we have to do 80 hours of initial training to become provisional. And then after that, you have to do 3 30-hour courses. So you have a total of 170 hours to just to get started. There's a state class test and state test. Once you get there, they say, okay, well, you have enough knowledge where you don't necessarily need a broker in charge, but understand all the additional liability you take on by being self-supervised. And so that's really the difference now. In South Carolina, it's the same. You start out as a salesman, and then after you have a certain number of years in the business, certain number of transactions, you can transition to be a broker. There's an additional examination that's required. But
thank you for that. Because I know there are fine line nuances there, and as you said, it differs state by state, as most professions do. But so tell me, how do you personally utilize both your skill set as an attorney and a realtor in your everyday life?
So from a professional standpoint, really, on the legal side, the real estate never really comes in, because it's just such a distinct area that every now and then I may have a case where I draw on some knowledge, but it's really a separate thing. From the real estate standpoint, couple of things. I tell my clients up front, you are getting a experienced educated real estate broker. I am not your legal representative. However,
that's right.
My legal antennas always go up. I'm going to ask the questions. I'm going to help facilitate the transaction. I always invite people to have a number of professionals involved. And sometimes I make recommendations, not because I'm not competent, but because I think there's room enough for multiple professionals to make sure you have a smooth transaction. Yes. So in the real estate realm, just a general transaction, of course, I'm well versed in our contract, which in North Carolina is 17 pages long and 23 sections long.
It is.
I'm well versed in the addendums and the required disclosures. And I assist my clients in understanding all of that. Even sometimes when other real estate brokers don't maybe have a full grasp or an appreciation for the information, I make sure my clients are covered, because there's a lot. For most people, this is the largest financial transaction you will make. Right. And it encompasses your income, your debts, your credit. Like, there's so much involved. If we don't know those details by contract, we're in trouble. And so that's where some parts of my legal experience come in. Another area is I have decided, after many years of general brokerage, that I also want to develop my niche. And my niche is really, I call them litigatory transactions. That's a made up term. I took some license there, making that.
Whatever works. Whatever works.
It includes really divorce transactions and probate transactions. Those are very unique. They do require additional training and skill. And even as an attorney, I'm constantly seeking out additional information and resources to polish my representation in those areas. They many times in both divorce and probate transactions, the courts appoint or approve the realtor that is, and I'll add in their bankruptcy as well. They approve the attorney that's representing the parties in those transactions. And so it takes not only having a consultation with the client, but sometimes their attorney, sometimes the opposing party, sometimes the opposing attorney. And that's where my expertise in the legal field also can help. Sometimes I have to reassure people, I'm not stepping on your attorney's toes. I'm not going against the legal advice that's being provided to you. I'm here to legally and professionally facilitate the real estate portion of this transaction. So
and that makes sense, but they're getting 2 for 1 though. And I understand, because really it's great to have a realtor who is also an attorney, because at the end of the day, it is basically a legally binding contractual document that you have to adhere to. And if you have somebody that you can basically call to reference and say, hey, what does this section such and such means? Well, you're equipped, you're knowledgeable, you're skilled, you're trained to be able to, especially if they can't get their attorney on the phone. Because a lot of times in real estate closings, those attorneys really come at closing. It's not a lot of interaction prior to that, and which leads me to the next question, talking about the similarities between being a realtor and an attorney. I can imagine that it's basically, I would say for the most part, it's the representation of it. But can you think of anything else or that you find where they made those skills overlap and you're like, what are the similarities?
So one other area I forgot to mention is also new construction. So I'll throw that in as well, which is a little bit different building process. But really, you have to be, to me, you're a mediator, you're a negotiator, you are a contract interpreter, you are sometimes a little bit of a therapist to calm people down and to give them context. I think, for many clients, especially people who've been so accustomed to losing, to really be in line to win, they need that assurance that all the T's are crossed, all the I's are dotted, everything is happening. And so one of the things that I warn clients about is I ask a lot of questions, and it's not of them, of their lender, of the builder, of the whatever, of the process. Not because I'm trying to be nosy, but because my mind is thinking about all of the possibilities and all of the additional details that need to be clarified. For example, Sunday I was out with some clients and they were looking in Trinity, North Carolina, and the association there are living in, they're very payment conscious, which a lot of people
Mm-hmm.
are, but the entry level association fees did not specify what was going to happen if additions were added later in the building process to the community. Are those those initial homeowners going to be affected? And so we had to find in the contract where their fees will not change. Minor detail, but it made a big difference for those clients. And so I think it's important. And I think the crossover, the overlap is being able to not just read and understand the contract, but to make sure we clarify the details that may not be so apparent.
I love that. I love that. The one thing that I also I noticed in terms of the representation fact is that in having someone to be able to navigate that, it does ease a lot of the pressure. It eases a lot of, I'll say, the anxiety that comes with purchasing a house, especially if you're a first-time home buyer. And it is a large purchase. And some of those terms you just don't know. And they send over those electronic documents and they just tell you to sign. So I imagine having that, as you said, being a therapist, being a, the counselor, being, just easing that whole process. And it's good that you have the compassion to do that as well, because we do run into realtors that just look at numbers. And I think that's awesome that you're able to provide that level of comfort for your clients. So that's awesome. So do you find yourself, and some realtors serve in both capacities. I've met some that say, oh, I'm a seller's agent, or I'm just a buyer's agent. And then some say, well, I do both. Are you a seller's agent, a buyer's agent, or both?
So both is a general answer. I lean more to being listings based, just because that's where my niche is usually, where that business usually starts. But from a buyer standpoint, yes, I have several certifications and designations. And so one of them is accredited buyer's representative. One of them is a luxury real estate transaction certification. And and new construction as well. And so what I have found is many times, especially in a divorce, probate, or bankruptcy situation, people are coming out of those situations and need somewhere to go. And I'll highlight divorce in particular, because a lot of times I'm dealing with one of the other spouse who, now that their family home, that they went through that transaction with someone else, that's no longer the case. Where do I begin? Where do I start over? How do I, I don't even know how to do this by myself. I'm not sure I want to do this by myself. And so we have a real heart to heart. And oftentimes I recommend new construction, because you can get into a solid home, consistent payment, and little to no maintenance or headache of repairs. And so I end up in some situations also being a buyer representative for those transactions, or people who are just starting out and they want to do new construction. If there are clients that I cannot service either through capacity or kind of like within my areas that I service, I have a network nationwide of realtors that I deal with. Excellent. I have a team, and I'll make a referral. And I want to make this point that when people are deciding on a real estate agent, you may not decide on the first person you talk to. It's very important to interview that agent to make sure personality and communication wise you're a good fit. If you aren't, and you trust them though, have them make a referral for you. And people say, oh, realtors are just out for money. And but that's not really it. What I'm doing when I make a referral is I'm pre-interviewing that agent for you, so that I make sure that not only personality and communication level, but skill level, they're what you may need in that transaction. If you've never been through that transaction, you may not know what you need. And so I did just want to make that point that there are some great realtors who can offer more than just buyer or seller representation. They can offer that referral base as well.
Okay. Excellent. I think that's a great point. I'm glad you clarified and provided additional foundational information with respect to that. So let me ask you, do you primarily execute, it sounds like more you're on the residential side, or do you do commercial deals as well?
Mostly, the majority of my business is residential. I have done a few commercial deals, a few salons and event space placements. It's not where I focus my efforts, but I'm capable, and I have done some commercial.
Okay. Okay, great. So then what is it about, I'll say, real estate that you like most?
It's something about the long-term impact that I believe, the wealth growth, the being able, the stability that I really love about the transaction. And of course, I don't do this for free. It's not a free service I provide, but I really find joy when people call me a couple years down the line and they tell me that, they decorated their child's room and they were able to bring their baby home to their new, their
yes.
baby to their new home.
Yes.
Or, my job is relocating, I need to sell. And I tell them, you have 100,000 in equity. And they're blown away.
Yes.
So it's really the lasting impact that real estate has on people. Believe it or not, in a lot of Black and brown communities, I'm having first time buyers who are in their 50s, and to me that is just, I can't tell you how many closings I've cried because they didn't think they could ever buy a home, and here we are signing.
Here we're signing.
Or clients I have some clients who bought a beautiful home in Lincolnton, and we searched and searched and searched, and we could not find a home in their price point in this area. We found one in Lincolnton, beautiful home, beautiful backyard, and they have 3 little boys. And they came to closing, and I had little coloring sheets with a little agreement. I will help keep, the yard clean. I'll help keep my room clean. They were a part of the transaction. So hopefully that imprinted on them when they're, 18, 20 years down the line. I can do this too because I saw my mom and dad do it.
Excellent.
That for me is just
right. Yeah. That's certainly gratifying. I mean, and to be able to know that you played a part in effectuating change for an entire family, and that will last for years to come.
Yes.
Wow. Excellent. What is the process of purchasing a new construction home?
So with new construction, I when people are starting out and I'm talking to them, I give them the pros and cons of both the new construction and a pre-existing process, because I think there's pros to both and there's cons to both. Yes. And, some clients say, I don't know what I want. And I say, well, let's look at both. Let's do 2 or 3 new construction, 2 or 3 pre-existing, and you can kind of get a feel. I think the great thing about it is you can pick a home from bottom to top. You can customize it. You can make it your own. And there's some benefit in that because having built a home myself and then moved into a pre-existing home, there's a lot of things that I say or I'm involved in the process where I'm pointing out practicality, right? If you're building new construction and you start from beginning to end, you get to go to the design center, you're picking options, you're putting ceiling fans where they need to be. And a lot of times I'm explaining to those clients, don't think about just today, your current living situation. Think about down the line. Are you going to want to possibly put a ceiling fan in this room? Are you going to wood hardwoods? And so that's part of the process and the benefit there. For pre-existing homes, if there are things in that home that you want to change, you got to price that, include that in your long-term equity forecast, right? If you're buying a home and you think you're going to have to redo the kitchen in 5 years because you just can't stand that yellow tile in there, we got to kind of keep in mind what that looks like. For some clients, they're like, I love the house and where it sits and everything so much, I don't care. For some clients, they say, I'd rather start from scratch. When you're thinking in new construction, the process really starts with consultation with the realtor, of course. Then, and this comes out of order for a lot of people because a lot of realtors don't say this, get your own pre-approval from your own lender outside of the builder's process. It's just like shopping for a car. When you're shopping for something, you want to know your own buying power. You don't want someone else to tell you what you can afford. You want to go in the door.
Absolutely.
And I tell people to do that even before they start shopping communities, which is a little bit different than some of the traditional or conventional advice. The reason being, if you can afford $400 and you're shopping at $500, your palette is not set for your budget. And it can be very, it can turn people off very early in the process. There's great homes at every price point, but you got to know what you're comfortable with. After you find a lender and get pre-qualified, then we start looking at homes. You're going to tell me I need a hyperallergenic home, then I know this builder, or I need a smart home, then this builder. I want to customize a lot in my home, then it's this builder. And that's kind of the benefit of working with someone who's a new construction specialist. I'm going to tell you about all the builders, but if based upon what you tell me, I'm going to make some recommendations.
Yes.
You pick the home, you pick your plan, you pick your lot, you go under contract. Contracting in new construction is not just zip forms. It is usually a 2 to 3 hour appointment because there's many pages to the contract. For many in that process afterwards, then we're design center. We're picking options. One of my favorite builders, True Homes, which a lot of them are favorite, but True Homes is top of the list. They allow the most customization at a affordable price point. But people can go crazy. I've been in there where people spend $7,500. I've been in there where people spend $70,000. And having your all over the place. Because you can really ball out. But having a realtor there helps you to know what's practical, what's reasonable, and what's makes sense in the circumstances. There are some things that I say, if you want it, you got to do it now because it's going to make the most sense. But there are some things that I'm going to say, really think about this because this is an easy add-on later.
Definitely.
Most clients really appreciate that additional insight because they don't find themselves at the closing table unable to close because the house didn't appraise because you put too much stuff in it.
Right.
And so that's the next thing. Then the building process. Once you've gone through the design center process, from final contract to close is about 6 to 8 months. And so the other day I did a post about if you're looking to build a home, time to start if you want to close in January, February, because people don't have an appreciation for that process. And it is a process.
Yes.
One of the main things, and I'll say this if you allow me time, one of the main things that I think people underappreciate in the new construction process is the the need for multiple inspections, multiple independent inspections. Even in new construction or an inventory home, which is a home the builder is already built and you're going to buy it pre-made.
Yes.
I highly recommend a home inspection.
Absolutely.
I had a realtor call me. She was moving to the area and she was looking to work with me. And I was talking through this process and I said, I do recommend 2 to 3 inspections in the building process. And she was floored. Who would do that? Why would people do that? The builder's going to do an inspection. I said, well, the builder doesn't work for you. They're not going to necessarily tell you everything wrong with the home.
What the home? That's right.
Right. And they're lovely people. They're not necessarily trying to deceive you or defraud you, but you need your own independent preview of the home. I say the same thing about working with a new construction agent versus the sales agent on site. Again, I have to reference this agent I worked with on Sunday. She was amazing. She did a great job explaining to my clients, I don't work for you. I work for the builder. MJ works for you.
And that's
so important.
And transparent.
And transparent. And I'll be honest, there's some people who think, well, if I don't use a realtor, they'll take more off the house, or I really don't need a realtor because there's a realtor on site. And it's like, that is not your representative. So that's important.
And although they're supposed to disclose certain things, basically what they say, those issues that are not in plain sight, at the end of the day, they are making money for the company that they work for. So certainly I see the need in having representation there, independent representation, as well as those inspections, because you may discover some things that they did not disclose.
Yep.
So I'm going to turn a little bit here. So the real estate boom, there's a lot of conversation in March that went down because I'll say at least long as I've been in the within the age of buying homes, there's a standard almost fixed, even though it's always been negotiable, I understand. But I'll say the standard practice was that there was a 6% commission that was assessed, to the home buyer, whoever paid it or agreed to pay it, be it the buyer or the seller. But usually the real estate company or the real estate, not really just the agent, the company, the firm would assess that 6% charge. So in March, I found it interesting that March of this year, it said the National Association of Realtors, otherwise known as NAR, entered into a settlement with a group of home sellers agreeing to end the landmark antitrust lawsuits by paying $418 million in damages and essentially eliminating rules on commissions, most notably the 6% commission that was most often assessed by real estate agent and or brokers. Please just, if you will, share your opinion on that. And the reason why I wanted to ask you this, really more locally, because you're a North Carolina, South Carolina realtor, is that I actually saw Egypt Sherrod, I think, on CNN or one of those platforms, networks, and she addressed, she basically gave her opinion about it. So I wanted to actually elicit your opinion, get your opinion, just to see what you felt about this new discovery or settlement.
So first, let me give the disclaimer that this is my personal opinion. This is not the opinion of Carrot Properties, and I'm not an expert on this, but I will say, I think it's confusing. I think that the news and the media has taken the information and skewed it in a way where it says no more commissions to realtors. And that's not the case. What was happening in that lawsuit is there were many states do not have, let me go back a little bit. The real estate business primarily started out just seller representation, just listings. If you wanted to buy a house, you had to come, you would use a realtor, but sometimes you'd call the seller's realtor. The business has transitioned over the years, so now we have buyer's agents. Well, a lot of states did not have buyer's agency agreements. And so what was happening is there was this conversation that was going on with sellers where you just have to pay it. And they were not given the option to either negotiate it or to agree to it. And so North Carolina is actually a model state as it relates to buyer's agency agreements. We've had buyer's agency agreements since I've been in the business. So what that means is that, and now we have not done a great job explaining what happens in a buyer's agency agreement situation, but sellers agree to pay a firm a specific commission. The firm that lists the home agrees to cooperate with a buyer or with a unrepresented buyer. And then that's how they share the commission. What is happening at the same time is if I'm representing a buyer, we have an agreement. This is what my role is. This is how much I get paid. Technically, you're responsible for this, but the cooperation from a seller contributes to that. So it could reduce the amount that you owe our firm. So we've always had this agreement in North Carolina. South Carolina, I think there's some transition that's happening there, but they're transition. What our firm has always said is the fee is the fee. The fee is a certain amount. Now, it's not set by industry standards. It's not set by even community standards. Our fee is based upon our efforts in marketing to sell your home. There's a lot that goes on. I think I did a post a little while ago. It's about 120 activities that goes on behind the scenes. And most agents, listing agents, are spending their own marketing dollars to prepare your home for sale. Likewise, for buyers, if you think about it, the average buyer takes 6 to 8 months to find a home. So if I'm showing you, let's just say 3 homes a weekend over 6 to 8 months, that's over 50 houses that we're previewing in order to prepare you to buy a home. The commission that is paid for that representation is all the buyer's responsibility. It's just that sellers, builders, sometimes for sale by owners, we have to say to them, hey, I have a client who wants to buy this home. Are you willing to pay a commission? If they say no, then I've got to go back to my buyer and say they're not willing to contribute to our firm's fees. That means it's your sole responsibility. Do you still want to proceed with this home? Now, I honestly think the confusion that's come out from this settlement makes things harder for buyers, because now buyers are thinking, I can't afford a down payment and a realtor fee. And they don't even realize a lot of times. The other thing, I'll say this before I get to that point. The other thing that's come about was the commissions were not being discussed openly. So a lot of realtors were only taking clients to properties that had a certain commission, instead of saying, we're going to look at all the properties you want to look at, but I'm going to explain to you each one, the ones that you decide to make a move on, this may be your responsibility as it relates to the commission. So now the the NAR is requiring that commissions not be advertised in MLS, but that they be advertised basically, which I don't think is a good idea. I think it should be advertised out in the open for everybody.
Okay.
But they can't be advertised as part of the listing. They have to be separated from the listing of the home.
Okay.
I don't think that's the best idea, but nobody asked me. I think it should be advertised as part of the home, so everybody is clear up front what's happening.
Absolutely. I mean, transparency is key. And I think that's a lot of times. So, you know, because in basically purchasing a new home or just purchasing a home in general, the anxiety that people have in general, you don't want to be looking at your representation thinking that they're trying to get you, you know, and basically, as you just, you know, pointed out, you know, there are some are just taking their clients to certain areas based off commission numbers and saying, oh, okay, well, I'm going to get this amount of money, or this will be my take home as a result of going into and taking them to these areas, as opposed to saying, hey, what do you really want? Let me find, you know, let me cater to your needs. Let me take you to the spots you want to go to, or the house ideally that you describe best. But, you know, and it's I know it's interesting. You find some good and bad professionals in everything that you essentially do, in every profession. But that's interesting. And I do appreciate you providing your opinion. As you said, you're not speaking on behalf of anybody else. This is just your personal opinion. So certainly wanted to reiterate that. So let me ask you then, how has NAR's decision, this is recent, we're only in May of this year, has it impacted, or have you seen how it's impacted, other than you said the buyers, but from a real estate perspective? It seems like some realtors are, I'll say, maybe a little frustrated, because then I don't know if there's an educational component. Like you said, there's a disconnect there. How has this NAR decision affected you personally, or maybe your business in real estate?
I honestly, I can't say it's affected me at all at this point. I think it's important. I've been really trying to understand it, where it came from. It really doesn't involve states that have buyers agencies, because we've always had these in place. But from a consumer facing standpoint, to make sure that there's clarity and knowledge and education, I think that I've spent a lot of time trying to make sure, one, we reiterate the value of realtors. There are some states where the buyer always paid their realtor. There was never any contribution from the seller. I think New York is one of them. They even pay rental agents a bigger, a pretty sizable portion to work with them. I think the downside is, and I think where we're going to struggle is, there's a lot of people who are looking for entry to home ownership who may be overburdened by the amount of funds now. I've heard a lot of conversations about realtors now requiring retainer fees, because if there's no guarantee of of our fees being met at closing, what's the incentive of showing 50 houses in 6 months to clients who could just walk away, which has always been the case. Let me make sure I say that.
Right.
It's from a buyer standpoint, there's pretty much, both sides of the transaction. Realtors aren't paid until the transaction closes. So there's many states where they do charge a retainer fee to even, and honestly, it's not that unrealistic. It's not that unreasonable if you think about the fact that there's a lot of effort and time put into preparing clients to even start the process and then start the process.
Understood.
I think the most important thing the public needs to know, and potential clients need to know, is that working with a realtor, you're going to fare better if they're a competent realtor as a seller or as a buyer 99% of the time.
Totally
Not
agree
only
with that.
are we skilled and educated, we have liability. We have liability for not just making sure we do a good job in representing you, but making sure we check all those boxes as it relates to due diligence. We each carry errors and omissions insurance. And so not attorney level, but not too far from it.
Understood.
And so I tell people, you don't have to panic. A good realtor is going to help you get situated in the best situation financially and help you walk through that process. If you don't have a good realtor, fire them.
Yes.
Hire someone else.
Because that's easy. That's easy. And one of the things that a great point you raised, simply because, and there's a similarity there again, you know, the nexus between an attorney and a realtor. Think about it. We're talking about going in blind on some situations, not even knowing. It's no different than when a person who has committed a crime that represents themselves pro se in court. You need an attorney. Do not go in there without representation. It's no different. So I totally agree with what you're saying. If you don't know anything about real estate and you're trying to go do something, don't do it blindly. Get some people in there, or a realtor or a representative that can speak to these issues for you and represent you in the way that you need. So it's no different. Again, I just want to highlight that point there. And we're drawing to a close here. So is there a resource or website that you can point, you know, new home buyers or buyers to that can kind of answer general questions?
So honestly, I will say the National Association of Realtors, there's a ton of documents and videos. I like videos because they're actual, they speak to you, but they have a lot of information on videos, not just on the process, but what a lot of the different forms mean in the process. But I have to reiterate, there's a lot of misinformation out there as well. And I think it's important for people to talk to your friends and neighbors who've had good transactions and good experiences, and interview. Even when family calls me, I just tell them, thank you so much for considering me. But I do recommend you interview 2 or 3 agents, because my ego is not so big to think I have to be everyone's realtor. From a capacity standpoint, because I do have another career, I can't be everyone's realtor. What I can do is be a resource and point you in the right direction, and at least, you know, be considered. Most realtors, this is one point I have to make. If you're working with a realtor, you can't call another realtor for advice. So choose wisely in the beginning. It's kind of like legal advice. If you have an attorney and you're not sure what they're telling you, you really can't go consult with another attorney, because most of the time they're not going to step on that other professional's toes and potentially provide you conflicting information. I've even had this happen where, you know, somebody says, well, can I call you? Yes, but I can maybe answer generally, but I can't get entangled in your transaction. And so that's why I highly recommend interviewing multiple agents, making sure that you all have a good line of communication. One thing I've had to learn is that generationally, I'm a texter and an emailer. There are some people who want to have a phone call every day. That I'm not your realtor. I'm very transparent what my priorities are in life. First, you know, God, then myself, then my children and my husband, and then my work and my business.
Absolutely.
And so I tell people up front, you know, this is how I show houses. This is how we're going to preview houses. I may be using showing agents. I may be using teammates. Both of my children are very involved in things. My daughter, you know, is a junior Olympian. So there are going to be some Saturdays I'm not available. So I set their expectation.
Absolutely.
And I think that's important. But if someone says, I need you available every Saturday from May to July, I'll have to refer them out. I'm not their realtor.
Yeah, it's not a good fit, because again, you laid the priority, you disclosed it up front. Yeah, I'll refer you. I get it. I totally get it. MjClay, a licensed North Carolina attorney and North Carolina, South Carolina real estate consultant with Carrot Properties, LLC. MJ has worked with residential and commercial clients to meet their real estate needs. In addition to general brokerage, MJ specializes in luxury listings, divorce, and probate transactions and new home construction. Also, as a notary and real estate investor, MJ's comprehensive experience and expertise provides a unique perspective for all real estate transactions. As a native of Charlotte, North Carolina, MJ is a proud wife and mother of 2 beautiful daughters, a proud alumna of North Carolina Central University School of Law and University of North Carolina at Charlotte School of Business. In her free time, MJ enjoys traveling, recreational sports, reading, and fellowshipping with friends and family. MJ, it has been a pleasure to speak with you today. Oh my goodness, you have provided a whole host of information. How can our listeners reach you?
I am going to provide you a link to follow me. I have a couple of things in the work. I do want to share that I do have. I don't know if you can see it.
Excellent. Okay, great. It looks great.
So I'm going to share some information. I have a couple little ebooks that really explain the process. I want to say, and I hope maybe if you ever talk about divorce separation, I hope you'll have me back on, because that's the area where I find that it's so underserved. There's so many people who do not have the knowledge or resources to understand the impact of that process. And so in following me, there'll be some more information coming forward, and I hope you'll join.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I've enjoyed watching some of the posts that that I've had an opportunity to view. I know you've been doing that for a while and educating people. So this is excellent. I'm excited about the book when it comes out. I'm sure it's going to be a good launch. So I know it's going to be great. So I'm excited about that for you. And certainly, I'd love to have you back on. So we'll do this again.
Thank you for having me. I've enjoyed it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And to the listeners, thank you guys again for another episode with Thinking with Tay. We really appreciate you stopping in, because you could stop somewhere else. But thank you for continuing to just learn a little bit more and think a little bit more about the things that we do in our everyday lives. But remember, I'm not telling you what to think. I'm only asking you to think. So until next time, goodbye.